So there's Admiral Klix of the Zephyrian Empire, standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Talon of Supremacy, admiring his own reflection in the command console. Picture a 7-foot-tall purple lizard wearing what looks like a rejected costume from a low-budget space opera, complete with shoulder spikes that serve absolutely no purpose except making doorways a nightmare to navigate. Behold, Klix announces to his crew, gesturing dramatically at the view screen, showing Jupiter's magnificent bulk, the primitive human solar system. Today we demonstrate the superiority of the Zephyrian Empire by capturing their pathetic civilians for ransom. His second-in-command, Commander Vex, nods enthusiastically. Vex has the intelligence of a particularly dim houseplant, which makes him perfect for agreeing with everything Klix says. Brilliant strategy, Admiral. These humans are nothing but soft, weak mammals who probably cry when they stub their toes. The bridge crew murmurs agreement, because apparently nobody in the Zephyrian military has ever heard of fact-checking. Their intelligence reports on humanity consist entirely of intercepted cooking shows and romantic comedies, but leading them to conclude that humans are emotionally unstable creatures who solve problems by either feeding people or kissing them. There, Klix points a clawed finger at the sensor display, a human transport vessel, probably filled with tourists taking pictures of their gas giant, perfect hostages. Weak, helpless, and their government will pay handsomely for their return. The ship in question is the Luna Belle, a civilian transport that looks about as threatening as a flying refrigerator. Its passengers are indeed tourists, returning from a relaxing cruise around Saturn's rings. What the Zephyrians don't know is that this particular group of tourists has the combined destructive capability of a small army, but we'll get to that delicious irony in a moment. Engage tractor beam, Klix commands, practically purring with satisfaction. Pull them into our cargo bay. I want them processed and cataloged within the hour. The Luna Belle gets yanked aboard like a toy, its engines powering down automatically when the Zephyrians jam their systems. The human ship settles into the cargo bay with a gentle thud that sounds almost apologetic. Admiral, reports the tactical officer, a nervous creature named Skex, we're detecting 47 life signs aboard the human vessel. All appear to be standard civilian biosignatures. No weapons detected. Excellent, Klix rubs his scaled hands together. 47 hostages should fetch a considerable ransom. Perhaps the humans will even throw in some of their primitive technology as a bonus. I hear they have something called pizza that's supposedly quite remarkable. The crew shares a laugh at this. Pizza, how adorably primitive. Inside the Luna Belle, Colonel Jake Morrison, retired Marine, age 68, sits calmly in his seat and checks his watch. His granddaughter Emma, 19 and art student extraordinaire, looks up from her sketchbook where she's been drawing the alien ship's structural weaknesses. "Grandpa Jake," she whispers, "I think we're being kidnapped by discount Godzillas." Jake glances around the passenger compartment, noting the other travelers. Dr. Maya Patel, who definitely didn't put former military explosives expert on her vacation forms. Chef Tony Ricci, whose knife collection would make a samurai jealous. Mrs. Gertrude Hoffmeister, sweet little old lady who once spent 30 years making hostile governments very nervous for the CIA. "Well," Jake says quietly, "this should be interesting." Back on the Zephyrian bridge, Klix is already composing his ransom message in his head, no doubt imagining the terror and desperation of the human government when they realize their precious civilians are in danger. Poor Klix. He has no idea that he just kidnapped the equivalent of a retirement home for extremely dangerous humans. The cargo bay doors hiss open, and out march a dozen Zephyrian soldiers in what can only be described as intimidating armor. If your definition of intimidating includes neon purple plating and helmet designs that look like angry pineapples. Leading them is Lieutenant Grok, who's been practicing his terrifying alien captor speech for weeks. He's particularly proud of the part where he mentions eating human bones, even though Zephyrians are actually vegetarians. "Attention, primitive humans," Grok bellows, his voice translator making him sound like a constipated robot. "You are now prisoners of the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Resistance is futile. Prepare to be processed and catalogued like the inferior species you are." Jake Morrison steps out of the Luna Belle first, moving with the casual confidence of a man who's been shot at by professionals and found the experience mildly inconvenient. He surveys the aliens with the expression of someone evaluating a new brand of breakfast cereal. "Well," Jake says conversationally, "you boys certainly went all out with the costume party theme. Did you make those outfits yourselves, or is there a galactic Halloween store somewhere?" Grok blinks his large, yellow eyes in confusion. This isn't how terrified hostages are supposed to behave. According to his training manual, humans should be cowering and begging for mercy by now. "Silence, human," Grok tries again. "You will show proper respect to your captors, or face the consequences." Emma bounces down the ship's ramp next, her art bag slung over her shoulder, looking around with the delighted expression of someone who just found a new subject to sketch. "Oh wow, Grandpa Jake. Look at their biomechanical design. The inefficient joint structures, the completely impractical armor weight distribution. It's like someone designed them by committee." She pulls out her sketchbook and starts drawing, casually noting structural weak points, weapon placements, and guard rotations. The aliens think she's drawing pictures of their magnificence. Emma is actually creating a tactical assault plan disguised as doodles. Dr. Maya Patel emerges next, her medical bag in hand. She takes one look at the alien technology around them, and her eyes light up like a kid in a candy store. Not because she's impressed, but because she immediately recognizes 17 different ways to turn their own equipment into very effective explosives. "Fascinating," she murmurs. "Primitive fusion containment systems, outdated power distribution networks, and what appears to be a centralized computer core with absolutely no redundancy protocols. How charmingly retro." Chef Tony Ricci steps off the ship carrying his culinary knife roll, which the aliens completely ignore, because they assume it's just cooking equipment. Tony looks around the cargo bay and nods approvingly. "Nice space. Good ventilation. Adequate lighting. I could work with this." Finally, Mrs. Gertrude Hoffmeister totters down the ramp with her knitting bag and thermos of tea, looking like everybody's favorite grandmother. She smiles sweetly at the nearest guard and says, "Oh my, what an interesting uniform, dear. That insignia on your chest, that indicates you're part of the 3rd Assault Division, doesn't it? How exciting." The guard, completely charmed by this harmless old lady, nods proudly. "Yes, honored prisoner, I serve in the glorious 3rd Division under Commander Vex. But how wonderful," Mrs. Hoffmeister continues knitting, "and I suppose your home fleet positions are." Meanwhile, Jake has been conducting his own psychological assessment of their captors. In his experience, enemies who felt the need to repeatedly tell you how superior they were usually had some pretty significant insecurity issues. The overly elaborate armor, the dramatic speeches, the obvious overcompensation in their weapon designs, the classic signs of a military force that had never actually been tested in real combat. So Jake addresses Grok with friendly curiosity. "How long have you boys been in the kidnapping business? A professional operation like this must have taken months of planning." Grok puffs up his chest proudly. "The Zephyrian Empire has been conquering inferior species for over 3 centuries, human. Your pathetic kind will merely be the latest to kneel before our might." 3 centuries, Jake nods thoughtfully. "And how many of those species actually fought back?" "Fought back?" Grok looks confused. "Why would prey fight back against predators?" Jake and Emma exchange a look. The same look that sharks might share when they realize they've just been invited to an all-you-can-eat buffet. From her corner, Dr. Patel has begun casually examining the alien technology, making mental notes about power couplings and structural stress points. Mrs. Hoffmeister has somehow gotten 3 guards to tell her their complete tactical deployment schedule. Tony is studying the aliens themselves, noting weak points in their physiology with the practiced eye of someone who knows exactly where to place a blade for maximum effect. And Emma continues sketching, her innocent-looking doodles now including detailed schematics of the cargo bay's security systems, which she's figured out by watching the guards' movement patterns. The Zephyrians, meanwhile, are congratulating themselves on how smoothly the operation is going. Their prisoners seem calm and cooperative. No screaming, no panic, no desperate escape attempts. If they had any experience with humans, they might recognize this behavior as the calm before the storm. But they don't, so they just assume they're dealing with a particularly docile group of tourists. Poor Grok. He has no idea that he's just given a group of extremely dangerous retirees both motive and opportunity to demonstrate why human beings spent centuries fighting each other before they ever left their home planet. Admiral Klix struts onto the bridge like a peacock with delusions of grandeur, practically glowing with anticipated triumph. He spent the last hour composing what he considers to be a masterpiece of intimidating diplomatic correspondence. Communications officer, he commands, settling into his unnecessarily large command chair, open a channel to the human homeworld. It's time to demonstrate the consequences of existing in Zephyrian space without proper tribute. The view screen flickers to life, showing a rather tired-looking human diplomat in what appears to be the Earth Defense Forces Communications Center. Commander Sarah Martinez has had a long day dealing with various interstellar incidents, and she's not particularly in the mood for whatever this is. Greetings, insignificant human, Klix begins, reading from his prepared speech with theatrical flair. I am Admiral Klix of the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Your pathetic transport vessel has been captured, along with its cargo of soft, defenseless civilians. Commander Martinez raises an eyebrow and checks her datapad. Which transport vessel would that be? The Luna Belle. Klix consults his notes, clearly not expecting questions. Containing 47 of your species, now held as prisoners aboard my flagship. There's a moment of silence on the other end of the channel. Commander Martinez appears to be typing something, her expression shifting from tired annoyance to what can only be described as barely suppressed amusement. I see, she says carefully. And you're demanding what, exactly? Klix puffs up his chest. Standard ransom for primitive species. 50,000 credits per prisoner. Plus technological tribute. Plus a formal acknowledgement of Zephyrian superiority over your pathetic civilization. More typing. Commander Martinez is now actively trying not to smile. And if we refuse? Then your civilians will face the terrible consequences of defying the Zephyrian Empire, Klix declares dramatically. They will be sold into slavery on distant worlds, never to see their precious Earth again. Aha, Martinez nods, still typing. Before we discuss terms, could you tell me which civilians we're talking about? I need to check our passenger manifest. Klix waves dismissively. Irrelevant. Humans are humans. Weak, emotional, completely helpless without their primitive technology. Right, well, let's see here. Martinez reads from her screen, her voice taking on a distinctly different tone. Luna Belle passenger manifest includes one Jake Morrison, retired colonel, 1st Marine Division, recipient of the Navy Cross, Silver Star, and Purple Heart, the veteran of the Siege of New Damascus. The bridge goes very quiet. Even Commander Vex looks up from his tactical display. Martinez continues reading. Emma Morrison, age 19, student, granddaughter of Colonel Morrison. Dr. Maya Patel, formerly Major Patel, Army Corps of Engineers specialized in explosive ordnance disposal and improvised demolitions. Antonio Ricci, Navy SEAL veteran, culinary arts graduate. Gertrude Hoffmeister, retired CIA field operative, classification level still pending declassification. Admiral Klix feels a strange sensation in his stomach that he's never experienced before. It takes him a moment to recognize it as fear. You're joking, he says weakly. Oh, it gets better, Martinez grins now, not bothering to hide her amusement. The rest of the passenger list includes 2 more retired Special Forces operators, a former Army Ranger who now teaches wilderness survival, a retired Navy explosives expert, and several others whose backgrounds are, let's say, interesting. She leans forward, her expression shifting to something considerably less friendly. Admiral Klix, was it? You've just kidnapped what amounts to a reunion cruise for some of our most dangerous retirees. These are people who once spent their careers making hostile forces very, very sorry they decided to pick a fight with Earth. Down in the cargo bay, the helpless tourists have been busy. Jake has completed his assessment of guard rotations and identified 14 different tactical vulnerabilities in the ship's security. Emma has rewired 3 alien devices to serve as improvised communication equipment. Dr. Patel has identified the components needed to manufacture several types of explosives from common cleaning supplies. Mrs. Hoffmeister has somehow convinced a guard to give her a complete tour of the ship for her memoirs, and Chef Tony has volunteered to prepare meals for their captors. The aliens think Tony's just being helpful. In reality, he's conducting reconnaissance on their digestive systems and metabolism. You know, for professional reasons. Furthermore, Commander Martinez continues, clearly enjoying herself now. You should know that Earth takes a very dim view of anyone who threatens our citizens, especially citizens with these particular skill sets. We have a strict policy about that sort of thing. What policy? Klix croaks. Martinez's smile turns predatory. We tend to respond with overwhelming force and a complete lack of proportionality. It's a cultural thing. We're funny that way. The communication channel closes, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in stunned silence. Commander Vex clears his throat nervously. Admiral, perhaps we should consider releasing the prisoners and offering a formal apology. Klix stares at the blank view screen, feeling the foundations of his worldview crumbling around him. How are we supposed to know? They looked so harmless. They're tourists. Sir, reports the tactical officer, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching our position. Large ships. Moving very fast. Through the viewports, space begins to shimmer as the cavalry arrives. While Admiral Klix contemplates the cosmic unfairness of accidentally kidnapping humanity's most dangerous retirees, but said retirees have been having the time of their lives turning his ship into their personal playground. It started innocently enough. The Zephyrians, still convinced they're dealing with harmless tourists, have been allowing their prisoners considerable freedom of movement. After all, where are they going to go? They're on a spaceship in the middle of nowhere. This logic fails to account for the fact that humans, especially these particular humans, treat obstacles less as barriers and more as interesting puzzles to solve. Emma Morrison has set up what appears to be an art studio in the cargo bay, complete with easels and painting supplies that the guards find charmingly primitive. What they don't realize is that her abstract paintings are actually detailed technical schematics of every system she's observed, rendered in a visual code that would make any military intelligence officer weep with joy. Oh, this is fascinating, she says to Guard Unit Zerk, who's been assigned to watch her, the way your lighting systems interface with the power grid. So beautifully inefficient. Mind if I sketch the junction box over there? Zerk, who has developed something resembling a crush on this strange human female who finds his technology aesthetically pleasing, gladly shows her around. He even explains how various systems work, thinking he's sharing the glory of Zephyrian engineering. Emma nods and sketches, occasionally making appreciative noises. What Zerk doesn't know is that she's identifying every single point of failure in the ship's infrastructure and developing a prioritized shutdown sequence that would leave the Zephyrians floating dead in space within 12 minutes. Meanwhile, Dr. Maya Patel has volunteered to help with medical research by examining the alien physiology. Purely academic interest, she assures the ship's medic, Dr. Yex, who's thrilled to have someone to discuss his work with. Your cardiovascular system is remarkable, Maya says, studying alien medical charts with genuine fascination. The dual-chambered heart configuration is so elegant. And these neural pathways, I bet a mild electrical disruption right here would cause complete temporary paralysis. Oh yes, Dr. Yex agrees enthusiastically. That's exactly right. We're quite vulnerable to electrical shock in that region. Evolutionary disadvantage, really. Maya makes careful notes, ostensibly for her research paper on comparative biology. In reality, she's compiling a comprehensive guide to non-lethally incapacitating Zephyrians, complete with pressure points, drug sensitivities, and psychological triggers. Chef Tony Ricci has become the ship's unofficial caterer, much to the delight of the crew. Zephyrian military rations, it turns out, are about as appetizing as cardboard soaked in motor oil. Tony's offer to show these boys what real cooking looks like was met with universal enthusiasm. The secret, Tony explains to his audience of fascinated aliens, is understanding your ingredients. Like these spices from your hydroponics bay. This one here mixed with this one creates a lovely flavor. But if you add just a tiny bit of this third one, he demonstrates by preparing a small sample. The watching aliens try it and immediately begin experiencing what can only be described as digestive enthusiasm. They spend the next hour making frequent trips to the bathroom. Tony muses, I guess your metabolisms are more sensitive than I thought. Good to know. No. The aliens think it's an accident. Tony has just conducted a successful field test of his ability to incapacitate the entire crew using nothing but seasoning. Mrs. Gertrude Hoffmeister has become the ship's unofficial grandmother, dispensing wisdom, knitting patterns, and homemade cookies to anyone who will listen. The guards have taken to visiting her just to hear her stories about the good old days on Earth. Oh my yes, she tells Guard Captain Klix, I remember when my late husband Harold was stationed in Berlin. Such interesting work he did for the State Department. Of course, that was all classified, but between you and me. She leans in conspiratorially, and Captain Klix finds himself learning detailed information about intelligence gathering techniques, psychological manipulation tactics, and 17 different ways to kill someone with common household items. He thinks she's just a chatty old lady reminiscing about her husband's boring government job. She's actually conducting a masterclass in espionage tradecraft while simultaneously mapping the command structure of the entire Zephyrian fleet. And through it all, Colonel Jake Morrison has been the perfect prisoner, polite, cooperative, and apparently resigned to his fate. He sits quietly in his assigned area, occasionally chatting with guards about military life, sharing war stories, and asking innocent questions about Zephyrian tactical doctrine. You know, he tells Lieutenant Grok during one of these conversations, your ship design is really impressive. The command hierarchy, the security protocols, the way you've organized your defensive systems. Very thorough. Grok beams with pride and launches into a detailed explanation of Zephyrian military organization, complete with rank structures, chain of command protocols, and standard operating procedures. Jake nods and asks thoughtful questions, playing the role of an old soldier admiring another military's professionalism. What he's actually doing is conducting a comprehensive intelligence assessment that would make any general staff officer green with envy. And by the end of their first day as prisoners, the humans have accomplished the following: complete technical documentation of the ship's systems, detailed psychological profiles of the crew, comprehensive intelligence on Zephyrian military organization, successful testing of non-lethal incapacitation methods, and establishment of a communication network using Emma's modified art supplies. The Zephyrians, meanwhile, think they're running a model prison operation. Their prisoners are cooperative, friendly, and genuinely interested in Zephyrian culture. No escape attempts, no violence, no problems whatsoever. If they had any experience with human military doctrine, they might recognize this as the reconnaissance phase of an operation. But they don't, so they just assume they've managed to capture an unusually pleasant group of tourists. Poor aliens. They have no idea that they're about to become the subjects of a case study in why you should never, ever mistake human kindness for human weakness. The Zephyrian reinforcement fleet drops out of hyperspace with all the subtlety of a brass band in a library, expecting to find Admiral Klix's flagship proudly displaying its captured human vessel like a trophy. Instead, they find the Talon of Supremacy floating in space with its running lights blinking in what appears to be Morse code. This is Fleet Commander Nexus to Admiral Klix. The communications officer tries repeatedly, please respond. Your ship appears to be decorating itself. Inside the flagship, things have gone completely sideways. It started when Chef Tony served dinner to the crew. Nothing too dramatic, just a mild case of what he politely called digestive recalibration. The entire night shift ended up incapacitated in the bathroom, leaving the day shift to pull double duty while looking distinctly nervous about their next meal. During this confusion, Dr. Maya Patel discovered that Zephyrian cleaning supplies, when mixed in the right proportions, create a compound that makes their artificial gravity generators hiccup. Not dangerous, mind you, just enough to make walking an adventure and fine motor control nearly impossible. Oh dear, she announced innocently as purple-scaled aliens began floating randomly around the corridors. I think I mixed the cleaning solutions incorrectly. So sorry about that. Emma, meanwhile, had been gradually rewiring sections of the ship's lighting system. Her artistic installations, which the aliens had praised for their creative use of available materials, were actually a sophisticated network of improvised electronics that gave her control over everything from atmospheric processors to the external communication array. The blinking lights that the reinforcement fleet was seeing? That was Emma, using the ship's hull illumination to broadcast a detailed tactical assessment directly to the approaching Earth fleet, which had been maintaining stealth positions just outside sensor range. Mrs. Hoffmeister had spent her time doing what she did best, gathering intelligence and making friends. By now, she knew the personal history, psychological profile, and deepest fears of every alien on the ship. More importantly, she'd identified which ones were smart enough to recognize a lost cause when they saw one. "You know, dear," she said to Guard Captain Klix as he floated past her in the corridor, trying to regain his footing, "it occurs to me that your admiral might have made what we humans call a tactical error." Captain Klix, who had been having the same thought himself, paused in his flailing. "What do you mean, honored prisoner?" "Well," Mrs. Hoffmeister continued, knitting calmly, "you've essentially declared war on a species that spent thousands of years perfecting the art of making other humans miserable before they ever figured out space travel. We're really quite good at it." Through the viewports, space began to shimmer as the first wave of human warships decloaked. Then the second wave. Then the third. "Oh my," Mrs. Hoffmeister observed mildly. "They seem upset." On the bridge, Admiral Klix watched his tactical display with growing horror as more and more red dots appeared. His own reinforcement fleet, which had seemed so impressive moments ago, was now outnumbered 3-1 by human vessels that were dropping out of stealth like angry hornets. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, voice cracking with stress, "the human ships are hailing us. All of them. Simultaneously." The main screen split into a dozen sections, each showing a different human ship captain. They looked like the kind of people who considered overkill a starting point rather than a destination. "Admiral Klix," said the center figure, a stern-faced woman wearing the insignia of the Earth Defense Force, "this is Admiral Rebecca Torres, commanding the Third Fleet. You have something that belongs to us." "Now see here," Klix began, but Admiral Torres cut him off. "No. You see here. You've kidnapped a group of our retirees. Nice folks. Quiet folks. The kind of people who just want to enjoy their golden years in peace." Her expression turned decidedly unfriendly. "Unfortunately for you, these particular retirees spent their careers being extremely good at extremely violent things. We demand their immediate release," added another captain, along with a formal apology and reparations for emotional distress. "Emotional distress?" Klix sputtered. Down in the cargo bay, Colonel Jake Morrison had finally decided it was time to stop pretending to be helpless. He stood up, brushed off his civilian clothes, and addressed the floating, nauseous, and gravity-confused Zephyrian guards with the calm authority of someone who had spent 40 years making difficult decisions in impossible situations. "Gentlemen," he said politely, "I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your current tactical position." The aliens looked at him in confusion. This was the same soft-spoken human who had been asking such interesting questions about their military organization. "You see, Jake continued conversationally, "while you've been showing us around your lovely ship, we've been conducting what we call a reconnaissance mission. Emma here has documented every system on your vessel and established communication with our fleet. Dr. Patel has identified 17 different ways to disable your ship without harming the crew. Mrs. Hoffmeister has compiled detailed psychological profiles on all of you, and Tony has demonstrated that he can incapacitate your entire crew using nothing but spices." He paused to let this sink in. "Now we could take over your ship. It would be embarrassingly easy at this point. But we're reasonable people, and we understand that you made an honest mistake." Lieutenant Grok, still trying to figure out which way was up in the malfunctioning gravity, stared at Jake in dawning horror. "You mean this was all planned?" "Oh no," Jake smiled, "this was just us being friendly. If we'd been planning something, you'd never have seen it coming." Through the ship's communication system came Admiral Torres' voice. "Admiral Klix, Your ship has been surrounded, your reinforcements are outnumbered, and our retirees appear to have taken control of your vessel using arts and crafts supplies. I strongly suggest you consider surrender." On the bridge, Admiral Klix looked around at his crew of floating, nauseous, increasingly panicked aliens, then at the tactical display showing dozens of human warships. Then at the communication screen showing very serious human military officers. Finally, Allah. His gaze settled on the internal security monitor showing Colonel Morrison calmly explaining to his guards why resistance would be both futile and unnecessarily unpleasant. "Commander Vex," Klix said quietly, "prepare a white flag." "Sir, we don't have a white flag." "Then make one. Quickly." 3 hours later, the Talon of Supremacy resembled nothing so much as the galaxy's most awkward diplomatic reception. Human and Zephyrian officers mingled in the cargo bay, while Emma Morrison sketched the historic moment. Dr. Patel discussed chemical engineering with fascinated alien scientists, and Chef Tony prepared what he diplomatically called culturally appropriate refreshments for everyone. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood with Admiral Klix, both of them watching this surreal scene unfold. Torres looked amused. Klix looked like someone who'd just discovered that his entire worldview was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. "You have to understand," Klix said for the 5th time, "our intelligence reports indicated that humans were a passive species. Emotional, yes, but essentially harmless." "What intelligence reports?" Torres asked, genuinely curious. "Intercepted broadcasts, your entertainment media, cooking shows, romantic comedies, documentation of your social interactions." Torres blinked. "You based your assessment of humanity's military capabilities on cooking shows and romantic comedies?" "In soap operas," Commander Vex added helpfully from where he was sampling Tony's alien-friendly pasta salad. "Don't forget the soap operas." Torres turned to Colonel Morrison, who was nearby discussing comparative military doctrine with several Zephyrian officers who seemed genuinely interested in learning from their mistakes. "Jake, did you hear this? They thought we were harmless because they watched our cooking shows." Jake looked up from his conversation and shook his head in amazement. "That explains a lot, actually. I was wondering why they kept expecting us to panic and beg for mercy." "We're really quite sorry about the whole thing," said Captain Klix, who had spent the last hour learning advanced intelligence-gathering techniques from Mrs. Hoffmeister. "In our defense, your species does seem to spend an inordinate amount of time preparing food and falling in love." "Well," said Mrs. Hoffmeister, looking up from her knitting, "we do enjoy both those activities. But we also enjoy a wide variety of other pursuits, some of them less peaceful." Emma finished her sketch and showed it to the group. It depicted humans and aliens working together to resolve their misunderstanding, with careful attention to the technical details of both species' equipment and the psychological dynamics of cross-cultural communication. "This is for my art class," she explained. "The assignment was to document an unexpected cultural exchange. I think this qualifies." Dr. Patel had struck up a conversation with the Zephyrian medical officer about comparative biochemistry. "It's fascinating how different our metabolisms are," she was saying. "For instance, that compound I accidentally created from your cleaning supplies would be completely harmless to humans, but it affects your inner ear functions in such interesting ways." "You did that on purpose," Dr. Yex accused, but without any real anger. "Well, yes," Maya admitted cheerfully, "but I was very careful to make sure it wasn't harmful. We're not monsters." The formal negotiations, such as they were, took place in the ship's conference room. Admiral Torres sat across from Admiral Klix with a document that could charitably be called a peace treaty, though it read more like a strongly worded lesson plan. "Let's review the terms," Torres said. "First, immediate release of all human civilians, with transportation back to Earth provided by your fleet." "Agreed," Klix signed quickly. "Second, formal apology to be broadcast to both governments, acknowledging that this was a case of mistaken intelligence." "Agreed." Third, establishment of a cultural exchange program so that future misunderstandings can be avoided." Klix paused. Cultural exchange? Educational, really, Torres explained. We'll send some of our diplomatic corps to explain human culture to your people. You send some of your people to learn about us, prevent future incidents. What she didn't mention was that Earth's diplomatic corps included a significant number of former military personnel who specialized in making sure other species understood exactly why picking fights with humanity was a poor life choice. And finally, Torres continued, reparations for emotional distress suffered by our citizens. How much? Klix asked wearily. Torres smiled. Actually, our citizens have requested something quite specific. They want to keep guard Captain Klix. Everyone turned to look at Captain Klix, who had spent the day learning about human intelligence techniques from Mrs. Hoffmeister, and was now staring at her with the expression of someone who'd just discovered his true calling in life. She offered me a job, Klix explained to Admiral Klix, consulting work, helping improve interspecies communication. What kind of consulting? Klix asked suspiciously. Mrs. Hoffmeister smiled sweetly. Oh, just helping other species understand human cultural nuances, preventing the sort of misunderstanding we had today. What she meant was that Captain Klix, who had proven himself to be both intelligent and adaptable, would be returning to Earth to help train the next generation of human intelligence officers in alien psychology and tactics. But that seemed like the sort of detail that didn't need to be mentioned in the formal negotiations. 3 months later, the story of the Zephyrian incident had spread throughout the galaxy, taking on the quality of legend. The exact details varied depending on who was telling it, but the essential message remained consistent: do not mistake human kindness for human weakness. The Galactic Council updated their species classification database to include a new warning label for humanity: friendly but extremely dangerous. Approach with diplomatic courtesy and genuine peaceful intent. Do not attempt to intimidate, threaten, or harm human civilians. Species has demonstrated disproportionate response capability when provoked. Back on Earth, Colonel Jake Morrison and his granddaughter Emma returned to their normal lives, though Emma's art professor was somewhat puzzled by her sudden interest in technical drawings and her detailed knowledge of alien engineering principles. Dr. Maya Patel went back to her research, though she now had a fascinating new project studying comparative alien biochemistry. Chef Tony opened a restaurant specializing in interspecies cuisine, with a particular focus on foods that won't accidentally incapacitate your alien friends. Mrs. Gertrude Hoffmeister returned to her quiet retirement, though she now had a regular video call schedule with Captain Klix, who was adapting remarkably well to life on Earth and had developed an unexpected talent for teaching human cultural nuances to confused alien diplomats. And Admiral Klix? He spent the rest of his career as a cautionary tale in Zephyrian military academies, where his experience became required reading in the course titled Why Intelligence Gathering Should Not Rely Solely on Entertainment Media. The galaxy learned an important lesson that day. Humans are indeed emotional creatures who enjoy cooking and falling in love. They also happen to be the descendants of persistence hunters who spent millennia perfecting the art of making life unpleasant for anything that threatened their pack. The cooking shows were real. The kindness was genuine. The romantic comedies accurately reflected humanity's capacity for love and connection. But underneath it all ran something else entirely: the quiet, patient, utterly ruthless determination of a species that had once hunted mammoth across frozen plains and had never quite forgotten how to bring down something much larger than themselves. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of seeing only the surface of humanity, the warmth, the emotion, the apparent vulnerability. They had missed the steel beneath, the carefully controlled power, and the absolute unwillingness to let harm come to their own. It was a mistake the galaxy would not make again. And in the end, perhaps that was the most human thing of all. They had turned a military incident into a teaching moment, a conflict into friendship, and a potential war into an opportunity for better understanding. After all, humans were emotional creatures who enjoyed cooking and falling in love. They just happened to be very, very good at protecting the things they cared about.